Hi, welcome back to my channel. We are reading Dostoevsky's White Nights here. I've already read the first part, so in case I'm posting this in parts, go watch the first part first and then come to this video. Well, so you survived, she said to me, laughing and taking hold of both my hands. I've been here for 2 hours already. You have no idea what I've been through today. I know. But now, to the matter at hand. Do you know why I've come? Not to talk nonsense like yesterday, you know. Here's why. We need to act more sensibly from now on. I thought all about this for a long time last night. But how? How are we to be more sensible? For my part, I'm ready. But really, nothing more sensible has ever happened to me in all my life than what is happening now. Is that so? First of all, please don't squeeze my hands like that. And second, I want to tell you that I thought about you long and hard today. Well, and what conclusion did you reach? Conclusion? I concluded that we must begin all over again, because today I came to the conclusion that I don't know you at all. That yesterday I acted like a child, like a little girl, and it goes without saying that it turned out that my kind heart was to blame for it all. That is, I praised myself, which is how it always ends when we start examining our actions. And that's why, in order to correct this mistake, I've decided to find out everything I can about you in the most detailed manner. But since there's no one from whom I can find out anything about you, you must tell me everything yourself. Everything that there is to know. Well, what sort of person are you? Quickly, begin. Tell me the story of your life. The story of my life? I cried out, frightened. My story? But who told you that I have a story to tell? I don't have a story. But how have you lived if there's no story? She interrupted, smiling. Absolutely without stories of any kind. I lived, as they say, on my own. That is, absolutely alone. Alone, completely alone. Do you understand what it means to be alone? But what do you mean by alone? What do you mean you never see anyone? Oh no, of course I see people, but nevertheless I am alone. But can it really be that you don't talk to anyone? Strictly speaking, to nobody. So who are you then? Explain yourself. Wait, I'll hazard a guess. You probably have a grandmother, like I do. She is blind, and for as long as I can remember, she has never let me go anywhere, so that I've practically forgotten how to talk. A couple of years ago, I got into a lot of mischief, and she saw that she couldn't control me, so she called me over and pinned my dress with hers with a safety pin. Ever since, we sit like that for days on end. She knits a stocking, even though she's blind, and I sit beside her sewing or reading a book to her out loud. It's such a strange way to live, and I've been pinned to her like that now for 2 years already. Oh my God, how dreadful. But no, I don't have a grandmother like that. But if you don't, then how is it that you stay at home? Listen, do you want to know what sort of a person I am? Well, yes. In the strict sense of the word? In the very strictest sense of the word. Well then, I'm a type. Type? What sort of type? The girl cried out, laughing as if she had not had a chance to laugh for a whole year. You're certainly very amusing company. Look, there's a bench there. Let's sit down. No one walks by here, no one will hear us, and you can begin your story. Because you don't succeed in persuading me otherwise. You do have a story, only you're concealing it. First of all, what is a type? A type? A type is an eccentric, a ridiculous person. I answered and burst out laughing myself in response to her childish laughter. He's a real character. Listen, do you know what a dreamer is? A dreamer? Excuse me, but of course I do. I'm a dreamer myself. What doesn't enter my head sometimes when I'm sitting beside my grandmother? Well, then you begin to dream and you become so lost in your thoughts that before you know, you're marrying a Chinese prince. But sometimes dreaming is a good thing. But then, God only knows, particularly if there's someone to think about without dreaming, the girl added, quite serious now. Excellent. If you've been married to a Chinese emperor, that means you'll understand me perfectly then. Well, listen, but excuse me, I don't even know your name. At last. You certainly took your time about it. Oh my goodness, it never entered my head. I was so happy as it was. My name is Nastenka. Nastenka? And that's all? That's all. Is that really not enough for you? What an insatiable fellow you are. Not enough? On the contrary, it's a great deal. A very great deal indeed. Nastenka. You're a kind of girl if you're Nastenka to me right now. So, there you are. So then, Nastenka, listen to what a ridiculous story it turns out to be. I sat down next to her, assumed a pedantically serious pose, and began as though I were reading something that had been written down. There are, Nastenka, in case you don't know, there are rather strange little corners in Petersburg. It's as if the same sun that shines for all of Petersburg people doesn't even peek into these places. But there is another different new sun as if specially ordered for these corners, and it shines on everything with a different special light. In these corners, dear Nastenka, it's as if a completely different kind of life is evolved, one that doesn't resemble that which seeds around us, but the kind that might exist in a faraway kingdom, and not among us in our serious, oh so serious times. And it is this life which is a mixture of something purely fantastic, fervently ideal, and at times, alas, Nastenka, dull, prosaic, and ordinary, not to say incredibly vulgar. Ugh, good heavens, what an introduction! Whatever will I hear next? You'll hear, Nastenka. It seems I shall never tire of calling you Nastenka. You'll hear that in these corners live strange people, dreamers. A dreamer, if you require precise definition, is not a man, but some sort of sexless being, you see. For the most part, he makes his home somewhere in an inaccessible corner, as if he were hiding there even from the light of the day, and once he goes into hiding, he sticks to his corner like a snail, or at any rate, he very much resembles in this regard that entertaining animal, both animal and house at the same time, which is called a tortoise. What do you think? Why does he love his own four walls, which are certain to be painted green, covered with soot, wretched, and unforgivably grimy from tobacco smoke? Why does this ridiculous gentleman, when one of his few acquaintances come to visit him and he ends up losing all his acquaintances, why does this ridiculous person greet him with such embarrassment, such a changed countenance, and such confusion, as though he had just committed a crime within his four walls, as though he had been forging counterfeit notes or some little poems to be sent to a journal with an anonymous letter in which it is revealed that a true poet has died and that his friend considers it his sacred duty to publish his ditties? Why, tell me, Nastenka, does the conversation between these two interlocutors never get going? Why does neither laughter nor some lively remark fly from the tongue of the completely unexpected and perplexed friend, who in different circumstances likes to laugh a great deal, as well as engage in lively banter and conversations about the fair sex, the other cheerful subjects? And why finally does this friend, probably a recent acquaintance making his first visit, because in this case there will be no second and the friend won't come again, why does this friend become so embarrassed, so stiff, all his wit notwithstanding, if indeed he has any, and as he looks to the crestfallen face of his host, who in turn has already managed to become completely flustered and utterly muddled after gigantic but futile efforts to smooth out and keep the conversation going, to show his knowledge of the ways of the world, to talk to about the fair sex, and the very least by such defense to please the poor person who has turned up at the wrong place and mistakenly come to visit him? Why, finally, does the guest suddenly grab his hat and quickly leave, having remembered all of the sudden some very urgent business which never existed, and somehow or other extricate his hand from the warm handshake of his host, who in every way possible was trying to show his regret and set right that which had been lost? Why does the departing friend chortle as he goes out the door, there and then vowing never to visit this crackpot, even though his crackpot is truly most an excellent fellow? At the same time, why he cannot deny his imagination the passing fancy of compare, if only remotely, the physiognomy of his recent interlocutor throughout the entire time of their meeting with the look of an unhappy little kitten treacherously captured by children who have mauled, frightened, and tormented in every single way possible, and which has finally taken refuge from them under a chair in the dark, and there for an entire hour at its leisure's bristles, hisses, and washes it a grieved face with both paws, and for a long time afterwards looks with enmity at nature and life, even at the scraps of his master's dinner, which the compassionate housekeeper had saved for him. Listen, interrupted Nastenka, who all this time had been listening to me in amazement, with her eyes and little mouth wide open. Listen, I absolutely do not know why all this happened and why you are putting such ridiculous questions to me, but what I do know for certain is that all these adventures certainly happened to you word for word. Without a doubt, I answered with the most serious expression. Well, as there's no doubt, then continue, Nastenka answered, because I very much want to know how it all ends. You want to know, Nastenka, what our hero was doing in his corner, or rather what I was doing, for the hero of this whole affair is myself, my own humble person. You want to know why I became so alarmed and was flustered for an entire day by the unexpected visit of a friend? You want to know why I was so startled, why I blushed so when the door to my room opened, why I didn't know how to receive my guest, and why I floundered so shamefully under the weight of my own hospitality? Well, yes, Nastenka answered. That's the whole point. Listen, you tell it splendidly, but could you tell it somehow less splendidly? Otherwise, you talk as though you were reading from a book. Nastenka, I answered in a dignified and stern voice, scarcely holding back my laughter. Dear Nastenka, I know that I am telling it splendidly. I plead guilty, but I don't know how to tell it differently. Now, dear Nastenka, now I'm like King Solomon's genie, trapped in an earthenware urn for 1,000 years, under 7 seals, and from which the 7 seals were at last removed. Now, dear Nastenka, when we have come together again after such a lengthy separation, because I have known you for a long time, Nastenka, because I have long been searching for someone, and this is a sign I was looking precisely for you, and that we were fated to meet now. Now in my head, thousands of values have opened, and I must set loose this river of words, or I will choke to death. So then, I will ask you not to interrupt me, Nastenka, but listen obediently and dutifully. Otherwise, I'll keep my silence. No. By no means. Speak. I won't say another word. To continue, there is my friend Nastenka. In my day, 1 hour that I like exceedingly. It is the hour when almost all business, duties and engagements are coming to an end, and everybody is hurrying home to dinner and lie down and rest, and there and then they're making their way home. They concoct other cheerful schemes pertaining to the evening, the night, and the rest of their free time. At this hour, our hero, allow me, Nastenka, to tell the story in the third person, because it's terribly embarrassing to tell all this in the first person. So then, after this, our hero too, who has also not been idle, walks along behind the others, but a strange sense of pleasure plays on his pale, somewhat rumpled face. With feelings he looks at the sunset, which slowly fades away in the cold Petersburg sky. When I say he looks, I'm lying. He doesn't look. He contemplates it, somehow without even thinking, as if he were tired or preoccupied at the same time with some other more interesting object, so that he can only curiously, almost involuntarily, spare time for everything around him. He is pleased because he has finished until tomorrow with the business that he finds irksome, and he is happy as a schoolboy who has been dismissed from the class to his favorite games and mischief. Look at him in the profile, Nastenka. You'll see at once the joyful feeling, fortunately, has already begun to have an effect on his weak nerves and morbidly excited imagination. He has fallen deep into thought about something. Do you think it's about dinner? About his evening? About he's looking at like that? At the respectable looking gentleman who bowed so picturesquely to the lady riding past him in a glittering carriage drawn by those frisky horses? No, Nastenka. What does he care about now after such trifles? His own particular life has already made him rich. He somehow suddenly became rich, and not in vain did the farewell ray of the dying sun so gaily sparkle before him and call forth an entire swarm of impressions of his warmed heart. Now he scarcely noticed the path on which the most petty trifle would have struck him earlier. Now the goddess of fantasy, if you have ever read Zhukovsky, dear Nastenka, has already spun her golden warp and begun to fashion before his eyes pattern of a fantastic, marvelous life. And who knows, perhaps her whimsical hand has transported him to seventh crystal heaven from the excellent granite sidewalk on which he was walking home. Try stopping him now and ask him suddenly where he's standing now, along which streets has he walked. He probably will remember nothing, neither where he was walking nor where he is now standing, and after blushing with vexation he will certainly tell some lie in order to save face. That's why he was so taken aback, almost crying out and looking all around in alarm, when a very respectable old woman who had lost her way politely stopped him in the middle of the sidewalk and began to ask him for directions. Frowning with vexation, he carries on walking, scarcely noticing that he has caused more than one passer-by to smile and turned round to look at him as he walked away, and that some little girl, as she timidly made way for him, began to laugh so loudly as she looked wide-eyed at his broad, contemplative smile and gesturing hands. But the same fantasy caught up in its playful flight with the old woman and the curious passer-bys and the laughing girl and the peasants who were spending their night right there on the bargers and the fontanka. Let's suppose that at this moment that our hero was walking along there and mischievously wove everybody and everything into its canvas, like a fly in a spider's web, and with his new acquisition, the eccentric had entered his comforting lair, sat down to dinner, finished his dinner long ago, and only came to when the pensive and eternally doleful Matryona, who waits on him, had already cleared everything from the table and given him his pipe. He came to and recalled with surprise that he had already had his dinner, but had taken no notice whatsoever how that was accomplished. It had grown dark in the room, his heart feels empty and forlorn. The whole kingdom of dream has collapsed around him, collapsed without a trace, without a sound or fuss. It flew past like a vision, and he himself doesn't remember what he was dreaming about. But some vague sensation faintly disturbs his breast, and it causes it to ache. Some new desire seductively tickles and excites his fancy, and imperceptible summons a whole swarm of new phantoms. Quiet reigns in the middle of the little room. Solitude and indolence caress the imagination. It faintly catches fire. It is faintly brought to the boil, like the water in the coffee pot of the old Matryona, who placidly potters about next door in the kitchen as she makes her cook's coffee. Now it's already gently breaking through in bursts. Now the book, picked up without purpose and at random, is already falling from my dreamer's hand, without his even getting to the third page. His imagination is once again incited, excited, and suddenly against a new world. A new enchanting life with his glistening vistas flashes before him. A new dream is new happiness, a new dose of exquisite, voluptuous poison. Oh, what does real life have to offer him? In his misdirected view, you and I, Nastanka, live so idly, slowly, sluggishly. In his view, we are all dissatisfied with our fate, so worn down by our life. And really, as a matter of fact, look how everything at first glance among us is cold, gloomy, indeed wrathful. The poor things, my dreamer thinks. And it's no wonder that he should think so. Look at these magical phantoms that so enchantingly, so whimsically, so boundlessly, and broadly take shape before him in such a magical animated picture in which the most important figure in the foreground, of course, is himself, our dreamer, is his own dear person. Look, what diverse adventures, what an endless swarm of ecstatic daydreams. You will ask, perhaps, what does he dream about? Why ask that? About everything. About the role of the poet who at first goes unrecognized but is later crowned with success. About friendship with Hoffman, Saint Bartholomew's Knight, Diana Vernon, the heroic role of Ivan Vasilievich in The Taking of Kazan, Clara Mowbray, Effie Deans, The Council of the Prelates, and Huss before them, The Rising of the Dead in Robert. Do you remember the music? It smells of the graveyard. Minna and Brenda, The Battle of Berezina, the reading of a poem at Countess Widi's Danton, Cleopatra, Iswa Amanthi, The Little House in Coloma, his own little corner, with a dear creature on his side who listens on a winter evening with her little mouth open and eyes open, just as you're listening to me right now, my little angel. No, Nastanka, what need has he, this voluptuous sluggard, of this poor life that you and I desire so? He thinks that this is a poor, pitiful life, not anticipating that perhaps someday the sad hour will strike for him as well, when for a single day of his pitiful life he would give up all his fantastic years and give them up for no joy or for happiness, without wishing to choose in the last hour of sadness, repentance, and boundless sorrow. But this terrible time has yet to come. He desires nothing, because he is above desire, because he has everything, because he is sated, because he himself is the artist in the life that he creates for himself every hour to suit his latest whim. And you see, this fairy tale fantastic world is created so easily, so naturally, as though all of this were truly not a phantom. Indeed, he is prepared to believe at certain moments that all of this life is not the excitement of feelings, not a mirage, not a delusion of the imagination, but that is indeed authentic, genuine, real. Why, tell me, Nastanka, oh why, at such moments does one breathing become labored? Why, by what magic, by what mysterious caprice does the pulse quicken? Do tears gush forth from the dreamer's eyes, his pale, moist cheeks burn, as his entire being fills with such irresistible delight? Why do whole sleepless nights pass by like a single instant in inexhaustible merriment and happiness, when the dawn's rosy ray shines through the window and the daybreak illumines the gloomy room with its dubious, fantastic light, such as we have in Petersburg? Why does our dreamer, exhausted and weary, throw himself on his bed and fall asleep, his tormented and overwhelmed spirit trembling with ecstasy, while his heart aches with a sweet agony? Yes, Nastanka, you deceive yourself and unwittingly and dispassionately believe that it is a genuine, true passion that disturbs his soul. You unwittingly believe that there is something alive and tangible in his incorporeable dreams. But you see, it's all a delusion. Take, for example, the love that has pierced his breast, with all its inexhaustible joy, with all its wearisome torments. Just look at him, you'll be convinced. Would you believe, when you look at him, dear Nastanka, that indeed he has never known her whom he loves, so his frenzied so in his frenzied daydreams? Can it be that he has only seen her in certain captivating phantoms and only dreamed this passion? Can it really be that he has not spent so many years of their lives together, hand in hand, alone, just the two of them, having forsaken the entire world and each uniting in their life, their world, with their life, with the life of their friend? Can it really be at this late hour, sobbing and grieving on his breast, not hearing the storm which was breaking under the bleak sky, or the wind which was plucked and carried away the tears from her black lashes? Can this really all have been a dream? This garden, cheerless, desolate and wild, with paths overgrown with moss, secluded and gloomy, where they so often would walk together, where they hoped, grieved, loved each other for such a long time, so long and tenderly, and this strange ancestral home in which she had lived for such a long time, secluded and melancholy, with her sullen old husband, always silent and peevish, who frightened them while they timidly as children, dolefully and timorously concealed their love from each other. How they suffered, how fearful they were, how innocent and pure was their love, and how, it goes on without saying, Nastenka, malicious people were. And my God, was it really not she he met later, far from the shores of the homeland, under an alien sky, in the torrid south, in the marvelous eternal city, in the brilliance of a ball, to the thunder of music, in a palazzo, it absolutely must be a palazzo, drowned in the sea of light, on this balcony, wretched with myrtle and roses, where she, upon recognizing him, so hastily took off her mask and whispered, "I am free," and trembling threw herself into his arms with a cry of rapture, they embraced, and in an instant they forgot sorrow, separation, all their torments, the gloomy house, the old man, the dismal garden, in their distant homeland, the bend on which, with one late passionate kiss, she had torn herself away from his arms, numb from the torments of despair? Oh, you must agree, Nastenka, that you would be startled, feel embarrassed, and blush like a schoolboy who had just crammed into his pocket an apple stolen from the neighbor's orchard. If some lanky, hearty lad, a merry fellow, and a joker, your uninvited friend, opened your door and shouted out as if nothing had happened, and I, my dear fellow, just got back to Pavlovsk. My goodness, the old count has died. Ineffable happiness is close at hand, and here people are coming from Pavlovsk. I pathetically fell silent upon concluding my pathetic exclamations. I remember that I wanted terribly somehow to force myself to burst out laughing, because I had already sensed a hostile little demon had begun to stir inside me, that I was about to choke, that my chin was beginning to quiver, and that my eyes were watering more and more. I expected Nastenka, who was listening to me with her intelligent eyes wide open, to burst out into her childish, irrepressible, merry laughter, and was already regretting that I had gone too far, that I had been wrong to tell her about what had long seethed in my heart, about which I could talk as though I were reading from a written text. Because I had long ago passed sentence on myself and now could not resist reading it to confess, without expecting that I should be understood. But to my surprise, she kept silent. After waiting a little bit, she gently pressed my hand with a timid concern and asked, "Can you really have lived your life like that?" "My whole life, Nastenka," I replied. "My whole life, and I believe that's how I'll end my days." "No, that's impossible," she said uneasily. "It won't be like that. That would mean I would likely live out my whole life by grandmother's side. Listen, you do know that it's bad for you to live like that." "I know, Nastenka, I know," I exclaimed, no longer holding my feelings in check. "And now I know more than ever that I've wasted all my best years for nothing. I know this now, and I feel it all more painfully now that I see that God Himself has sent you, my good angel, to me, in order to tell me this and prove it to me. As I sit beside you and talk to you now, I'm terrified to even think about the future, because the future is once again loneliness and once again the stagnant, useless life. And what will be there for me to dream about when I already have been so happy in real life beside you? Oh, bless you, dear girl, for not turning me away from the very first, for making it possible that I can now say that I have lived at least 2 evenings in my life. Oh, no, no. Nastenka cried out, and little tears began to glisten in her eyes. No, it won't be like that anymore. We won't part like that. What are 2 evenings? Oh, Nastenka, Nastenka, do you know you have reconciled me with myself for a good long time? Do you know that now I will not think so badly of myself as I sometimes have done? Do you know that now, perhaps, I will no longer suffer anguish from having committed a crime and sin in my life, because a life like this, that is a crime and sin? And do you think that I have been exaggerating anything to you? For God's sake, Nastenka, don't think that, because sometimes I am overcome by moments of such anguish, because at those moments it begins to seem that I will never be able to begin living a real life, because it already seems that I have lost all sense, all feeling for the genuine, the real, because in the end I curse myself, because after my fantastic nights I am visited by sobering moments that are horrible. Meanwhile, you hear all around how the throng of humanity thunders and spins in the whirlwind of life. You hear, you see how people live, they live in reality. You see that their life for them is not forbidden, that their life doesn't vanish like a dream, like a vision, that their life is eternally renewing, eternally young, and not a single hour of it resembles any other. Whereas how cheerless and monotonously banal it is, the timorous fantasy, the slave of a shadow, of an idea, the slave of the first cloud that suddenly obscures the sun and fills with anguish the heart of every true Petersburg, which holds its son so dear. But what sort of fantasy is there to be found in anguish? You sense that there is inexhaustible fantasy, is finally growing tired, that is becoming exhausted under constant strain, because you see you are growing into manhood, you are outgrowing your former ideals, they are being smashed to dust, to bits and pieces, and if there is no other life, then you must build it from the bits and pieces. But meanwhile, your soul yearns and pleads for something else, and in vain does the dreamer rake through his old dreams, and as if they were ashes, searching in those ashes for at least some little spark in order to fan it into flames, and with this rekindled fire warm his heart, which has grown cold, and resurrect in himself once again everything that he had held dear, that had touched his soul, that had made his blood boil, that had brought tears into his eyes, and had so splendidly deceived him. Do you know, Nastenka, how low I have fallen? Do you know that I am compelled now to celebrate the anniversary of my own sensations, the anniversary of which was formerly so dear, that which in essence never took place, because this anniversary is celebrated in honor of those same foolish phantom dreams, and to do it because even those foolish dreams are no more, because I have nothing with which to replenish them. You see, even dreams need to be replenished. Do you know that I now like to recall and visit at certain times places where I was once happy? In my own way, I like to fashion my present so that it's in harmony with the irrevocable past, and I often wander like shadow, without need or purpose, downcast and sad, throughout the alleys and streets of Petersburg. And what memories! You recall, for instance, that exactly a year ago now, exactly at this very same time, exactly at this very same hour, you wandered along in this very sidewalk, just as lonely, just as downcast as you are now. And you recall that your dreams were sad then as well, and even though it was no better then, nevertheless you somehow feel that it was easier, that you lived more comfortably, that there isn't black brooding that troubles you now. There wasn't this black brooding that troubles you now, that you didn't have these pangs of conscience, these gloomy, dismal pangs that now give you no peace, night or day. And you ask yourself, where are your dreams? And you shake your head and say, how quickly do years fly by? And again you ask yourself, what have you done with your years? Where have you buried your best days? Do you live or not? Look, you say to yourself, look how cold the world is becoming. More years will pass, followed by gloomy solitude, and then doddering old age will come on, a walking stick, to be followed by anguish and despondency. Your fantastic world will grow pale, your dreams will wither, die, and scatter like yellow leaves from the trees. Oh, Nastenka, it will be sad, to be left alone, quite alone, and not even have something to regret. Nothing, absolutely nothing, because all that I have lost, all this, it was all nothing, a stupid round zero. It was all merely a dream. Now stop trying to make me feel sorry for you, Nastenka said, wiping away a tear that had rolled down from her eye. That's all over now. The two of us will be together now. Now, no matter what happens to me, we will never part. Listen, I am a simple girl, without much education, although my grandmother did hire a teacher for me, but I truly do understand you, because everything that you've told me just now I experienced myself when grandmother pinned me to her dress. Of course, I couldn't have told it so well as you have done. I am not educated, she added timidly, because she was still feeling some sort of respect for my pathetic speech and my lofty style. But I am very happy that you have confided in me so completely. Now I know you, through and through. I know everything about you. And do you know what? I want to tell you my story now, all of it, frankly, and afterwards you'll give me your advice. You're a very sensible man. Do you promise to give me your advice? Ah, Nastanka, I replied, although I've never been an advisor, much less a sensible advisor, I see now that it would somehow be very sensible if we were to always live like this, and we would give each other a lot of sensible advice. Well, my pretty Nastenka, what advice should I give you? Tell me frankly. I'm so cheerful, happy, bold, and sensible now that I won't be at loss for words. No, Nastenka interrupted, laughing. It's not only sensible advice that I need advice that is heartfelt and brotherly, as though you had loved me all your life. All right, Nastenka, all right. I cried out in delight. And if I'd ever already loved you for 20 years, I still couldn't have loved you more than I do right now. Give me your hand, Nastenka said. Here it is, I answered. So I gave her my hand. And so, let's begin my story. Okay, now we have Nastenka's story. So let's see how long this is. We're starting at page 41 and the story goes on till page 56. So I'm pretty sure we can cover this right now as well. It shouldn't take more than, 20 minutes? Hopefully. Nastenka's story. Half of my life you already know, that is, you know that I have an old grandmother. If the other half is as short as this one, I interrupted, laughing. Keep quiet and listen. First of all, a condition. You are not to interrupt me or else I'll very likely get muddled. Now, listen quietly. I have an old grandmother. I found myself with her when I was still a very little girl because my mother and father had died. It's fair to suppose that grandmother had been richer at one time because even now she recalls better days. It was she who taught me French and then later hired a teacher for me. When I was 15 years old, I'm 17 now, the lessons stopped, and it was at this time that I got into a lot of mischief. But I won't tell you what I did. It's enough to say that my misdeed was minor. But grandmother called me one morning and said that since she was blind and couldn't keep an eye on me, so she took a pin and fastened my dress to hers, and then she said that we would sit like that for the rest of our lives if, of course, I didn't behave better. In a word, at first, it was quite impossible to get away. I did all my work, reading and studying, right beside grandmother. I once tried to trick her into and talked Fyokla into sitting in my place. Fyokla is our maid. She's deaf. Fyokla sat down instead of me, and grandmother had fallen asleep in her armchair at the time, and I set off for my girlfriend's not far away. Well, it ended badly. Grandmother woke up, and when I was away, asked about something, thinking that I was still sitting quietly in my place. Fyokla could see that grandmother was asking for something, but she couldn't hear what it was. She thought and thought about what she should do, undid the pin, and took to her heels. Here, Nastenka paused and laughed. I started to laugh with her. She stopped at once. Now listen, don't you laugh at my grandmother. I'm laughing because it's funny. What can I do when grandmother really is like that? But I love her all the same. Well, that time I certainly got what for. I was sat down in my place at once and wasn't allowed to budge an inch. Oh yes, I also forgot to tell you that grandmother has her own house, that is, a tiny little house with only 3 windows, all made of wood, and as old as grandmother herself. There's an attic upstairs, and so a new lodger moved into our attic. Consequently, there must have been an old lodger, I noted in passing. Well, of course there was, Nastenka replied, and one who knew how to keep quiet better than you do. True. He could barely move his tongue. He was a little old man, withered, mute, blind, lame, so that it finally became impossible for him to live in this world, and he died. We needed a new lodger because we can't live without a lodger, that together with grandmother's pension and practically our entire income. The new lodger, as luck would have it, was a young man, not from around here, from out of town. Since he didn't try to bargain with her, grandmother took him in, but later she asked, "So, Nastenka, is our lodger young or not?" I didn't want to lie. Now I say, "Grandmother, it's not as though he's very young, but he's not an old man." Well, and is he good looking? Grandmother asks. Again, I don't wish to lie. Yes, I say. He's good looking, grandmother. And grandmother says, "Oh, what a nuisance, what a nuisance." I'm saying this, granddaughter, so that you don't get carried away by him. Oh, what times we live in. Who would have thought it possible, such a piddling lodger, and he has to be good looking as well? Things were different in the old days. It's always the old days with grandmother. She was younger in the old days, and the sun was warmer in the old days. And the cream didn't go sour so quickly in the old days. It's always the old days. And so I sit and keep quiet and think to myself, why is grandmother filling my head with ideas and asking whether our lodger is handsome or whether he's young? But that was all there was to it. I just gave it a thought and there and then began counting my stitches again. I was knitting stockings and then completely forgot about it. And then one morning the lodger came to ask about his room being wallpapered as he had been promised. One thing led to another. Grandmother is talkative, you see, and she says, "Go to my bedroom, Nastenka, and bring me my accounts." I immediately jumped up, blushing. I don't know why. I'd forgotten that I was sitting there pinned to grandmother. I didn't quietly unpin myself so that the lodger wouldn't see. No, I dashed off so that grandmother's chair went flying. When I saw the lodger now knew everything about me, I blushed, stood there as if I were rooted to the ground, and burst into tears. I became so ashamed and miserable at the moment that life didn't seem worth living. Grandmother shouts, "Why are you just standing there?" which made me cry even more. When the lodger saw this, when he saw that I was embarrassed on account of him, he took his leave and went away at once. From that moment on, I would practically die at the slightest sound in the entrance hall. "There goes the lodger," I'd say to myself, and quietly undo the pin just in case. Only if it was never him, he never came. 2 weeks passed. The lodger sent word through Fyokla that he had a lot of French books and that they were all good books suitable for me to read. Wouldn't grandmother like me to read them to her so that we wouldn't be bored? Grandmother accepted with gratitude, but she kept asking if the books were moral or not, because if the books were immoral, then you, Nastenka, she says, mustn't read them under any circumstances. You'll learn bad things. And what would I learn, grandmother? What's written in them? Oh, she says, they describe how young men lead well-behaved girls astray, how under the pretense of wanting to marry them, they carry them off from their parents' house, how they later abandon these unfortunate girls to the whims of fate, and how then they perish in the most lamentable manner. I, grandmother says, have read a lot of books like that and everything, she says. It's so wonderfully described that you sit up all night quietly reading. So you, Nastanka, she says, see that you don't read them. What kind of books? She says. Has he sent? They're all novels by Walter Scott, grandmother. Novels by Walter Scott? But wait just a minute. There must be some sort of shenanigans going on here. Take a good look to see if he slipped in a little love note in one of them. No, I say, grandmother. There isn't a note. And look under the bindings as well. Sometimes they stuff it into the bindings. The rascals. No, grandmother, there isn't anything under the bindings either. Well, what did I tell you? And so we began to read Walter Scott, and in a month or so we had almost read half. Then he sent us more and some more. He sent Pushkin. In the end, I couldn't be without a book and stopped thinking about marrying a Chinese prince. That's how things stood when I chanced to meet our lodger on the staircase. Grandmother had sent me for something. He stopped, I blushed, and he blushed. He laughed though, said hello, asked after grandmother's health, and says, "So, have you read the books?" I answered, "Yes." "Which one?" he asks. "Did you like the most?" And I say, "I liked Ivanhoe and Pushkin best of all." And that was the end of it, that time. A week later, I ran into him again at the staircase. This time grandmother hadn't sent me, I had needed to get something for myself. It was after 2, which was when the lodger would come home. "Hello," he says. I answer, "Hello." "Don't you get bored," he asks, "sitting with your grandmother all day long?" As soon as he asked me that, I blushed. I don't know why I became embarrassed, and once again my feelings were hurt, evidently because now others had begun asking questions about this. I wanted to walk away without answering, but I didn't have the strength. "Listen," he says, "you're a good girl. Forgive me for talking with you like this, but I assure you I wish you well than your grandmother does. Don't you have any girlfriends whom you can go and visit?" I say that I don't have any, that there was one, Mashenka, but she was now gone away to Paskov. "Listen," he says, "would you like to go to the theatre with me?" "To the theatre? But what about grandmother?" "Well," he says, "you can go without telling her." "No," I say, "I don't want to deceive grandmother. Goodbye." "Well, goodbye," he says, and he didn't say another word. Only after dinner he comes to see us. He sat down, talked with grandmother for a long time, asked whether she goes out anywhere, whether she has any friends, and suddenly he says, "I took a box at the opera today. They are putting on The Barbel of Seville. My friends wanted to go and then cancelled. I'm left with the tickets." "The Barbel of Seville?" Grandmother exclaimed. "Is that the same barber they used to put out in the old days?" "Yes," he says. "It's the very same barber." And he cast a glance at me, and then I understood everything, blushed, and my heart began to thump in expectation. "But of course I knew it," grandmother says. "In the old days I even sang Rosina in amateur theatricals." "So would you like to go today?" said the lodger. "The tickets will go to waste." "Yes, I suppose we could go," grandmother says. "Why shouldn't we go? After all, my Nastanka has never been to the theatre." My goodness, what joy! We at once pulled ourselves together, got ready, and set off. Even though grandmother is blind, she still wanted to hear the music, and besides, she's a kind old woman. More than anything, she wanted me to enjoy myself. We should never have gone on our own. I wouldn't let you my impression of the Barber of Seville, except to say that all the evening our lodger looked at me so nicely and spoke so nicely. I saw at once that he had wanted to test me in the morning by proposing that I go with him alone. Well, what joy! I went to bed so proud, so happy, my heart was pounding, so that I became slightly feverish and raved on about the Barber of Seville all night long. I thought that he would stop by more and more often after that, but that wasn't the case. He almost stopped coming altogether. And so he would drop by once a month, and then only to invite us to the theatre. We went with him again a couple of times. Only I wasn't at all happy with this. I saw that he simply felt sorry for me because I was kept under grandmother's thumb, and there wasn't anything else to it. And then, as time went on, something came over me. I couldn't sit still, and I couldn't read, and I couldn't work. Sometimes I would laugh and do something to grandmother out of spite, while at other times I would simply cry. In the end, I grew thin and almost became ill. The opera season was over, and the lodger stopped dropping by altogether. Whenever we would meet, always on that same staircase, it goes without saying, he would bow so silently, so seriously, as though he hadn't wished to speak, and then walk down all the way to the front door, while I was still standing halfway up the stairs, as red as a cherry, because all my blood would rush to my head whenever we meet. Now we're coming to the end. Exactly a year ago, in May, the lodger comes to us and tells grandmother that he has finished all his business and that he must return to Moscow for a year. When I heard this, I turned white and collapsed on the chair, half dead. Grandmother didn't notice anything, and after announcing that he was going away, he took his leave and left. What was I to do? I thought and thought. I became more and more miserable, and finally I came to a decision. He was to leave the next day, and I decided that I would bring everything to a conclusion that evening after grandmother had gone to bed. And that's what happened. I gathered into a bundle of all my dresses, as many underclothes as was necessary. With the bundle in hand, never dead nor alive, I set off to our lodger's room in the attic. I think I spent an entire hour walking up the staircase. When I opened his door, he cried out upon seeing me. He thought I was a ghost and rushed to get me some water, because I could scarcely stand on my own 2 feet. My heart was pounding so that my head ached and my thinking had become confused. When I came to my senses, I began straightway by placing my bundle on his bed, sat down next to it, buried my face in his hands, and let loose a flood of tears. He seemed to understand everything in an instant and stood before me pale, looking at me with such sadness that it broke my heart. "Listen," he began. "Listen, Nastenka, I can't do anything. I'm a poor man. I don't have anything yet, nor even a decent job. How would we live if I were to marry you?" We talked for a long time, but in the end I worked myself into such a state that I said I couldn't live without grandmother, that I would run away from her, that I didn't want to be pinned to her, and that if he liked, I would go with him to Moscow, because I couldn't live without him. Shame and love and pride spoke in me all at once, and I collapsed on his bed, almost in convulsions. I was so afraid of a refusal. He sat in silence for several minutes, then got up, walked over to me, and took me by the hand. "Listen, my dear sweet Nastenka," he began, almost through tears. "Listen, I swear to you that if I ever am in the position to marry, then you will certainly be the one to make me happy. I assure you that now only you alone can make me happy. Listen, I am going to Moscow and will stay there for exactly 1 year. I hope to put my affairs in order. When I return, and if you have not stopped loving me, then I swear to you that we will be happy. But this is impossible now. I can't. I don't even have the right to promise anything. But I repeat, if this doesn't happen in a year's time, then it certainly will someday. It goes without saying, but only in the event that you don't prefer somebody else to me, because I cannot and dare not bind you by any sort of promise." That's what he told me, and the next day he went away. We both agreed not to say a word about this to grandmother. That was how he wanted it. Well, now my story is almost finished. Exactly a year has passed. He has arrived. He has been here already 3 whole days, and what? I cried out, impatient to hear the end. "And he still hasn't shown himself," Nastenka answered, as if summoning up all her strength. "There has been neither hide nor hair of him." Here she stopped, fell silent for a bit, bent her head, and suddenly, having covered her face with her hands, began to sob so hard that it broke my heart. I wasn't at all expecting an ending like that. "Nastenka," I began in a timid and ingratiating voice. "Nastenka, for goodness sake, don't cry. How do you know? Maybe he hasn't arrived yet. He's here. Nastenka rejoined. "He's here, I know it. We made an agreement back then, or on that evening before his departure, when we had already said everything I've told you, and we had come to an agreement. We came out here for a stroll right on this very embankment. It was 10 o'clock. We were sitting on this bench. I had stopped crying, and I was enjoying listening to him talk. He said that upon his arrival, he would come to us at once, and if I didn't refuse him, then we would tell grandmother about everything. Now he has arrived. I know it, but he hasn't come. He hasn't." And once again she broke down in tears. "Good heavens! Is there really nothing I can do to ease your sorrow?" I cried out, jumping from the bench in despair. "Tell me, Nastenka, couldn't I at least go and see him?" "Would that really be possible?" she said, suddenly raising her head. "No, of course not, no," I said, after giving it some thought. "But here's what you could do. Write a letter." "No, that's impossible. I couldn't do that," she answered resolutely, but she had already lowered her head and wasn't looking at me. "How is it that you can't? Why can't you?" I continued, taking up my idea. "But you know, Nastenka, you need a certain kind of a letter. There are letters and then there are letters, and oh, Nastenka, it's true. Believe me, believe me. I wouldn't give you bad advice. All this can be arranged. It was you who took the first step. Then why can't you now?" I can't. It would seem that I was forcing myself on him." "Oh, my dear little Nastenka," I interrupted, not concealing a smile. "Not at all. No. You, of course, have a right to, because he promised you. And everything tells me that he's a delicate person and he conducted himself properly," I continued, becoming more and more enraptured with the logic of my own arguments and convictions. "How did he conduct himself? He bound himself with a promise. He said that he would not marry anyone but you. If he does marry, he left you completely free to refuse him even now. Under such circumstances, you may take the first step. You have the right. You have the advantage over him. If, for example, if you wish to release him from his promise. Listen, how would you write it? What? Why, this letter? I would write it like this: Dear Sir. Is this dear sir absolutely necessary? Absolutely. But then again, why should it be? I suppose, well, go on. Dear sir, forgive me for... But no, we don't need any forgiveness. Here the fact itself justifies everything. Write simply. I am writing you. Forgive my impatience, but for a whole year, hope alone has made me happy. Am I to blame that I cannot bear even a day of doubt? Now, when you have come back, perhaps you changed your intentions. Then this letter will tell you that I do not complain, nor do I blame you. I do not blame you that I have no power over your heart. Such, then, is my fate. You are a noble person. You will not laugh, and you will not be annoyed by my impatient lines. Remember that they are written by a poor girl, that she is alone and she has no one to teach her or to advise her, and that she has never been able to control her heart. But forgive me that doubt should have crept into my heart for even a single moment. You are not capable of insulting, even in thought, the one who loved you so and still loves you. Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. Nastenka cried out, and joy began to shine in her eyes. Oh, you have resolved my doubts. God himself has sent you to me. Thank you. For what? For God sending me? I answered, gazing in delight at her happy little face. Yes, for that as well. Oh, Nastenka, you know, we thank some people for merely living at the same time as we do. I thank you for the fact that I met you and will remember you for all my life. Well, enough. And now look here, listen closely. We agreed then that as soon as he arrives, he would immediately let me know that he would leave a letter for me at a certain place with some acquaintances of mine, good and simple people who know nothing about this, or that he couldn't write me a letter because you can't always say everything in a letter. Then the very same day he arrived, he would be here at exact 10 o'clock where we arranged to meet. I know that he's arrived, but it's now the third day and there's been no letter, and he hasn't come. It's quite impossible for me to get away from my grandmother in the morning. Tomorrow, give my letter to these same good people about whom I just told you. They will forward it, and if there's an answer, then you bring it yourself in the evening at 10 o'clock. But the letter, after all, you need to write the letter, so this will all probably be the day after tomorrow. The letter, Nastenka answered a bit confused. The letter, but she didn't complete her thought. At first, she turned her little face away from me, blushed like a rose. Then suddenly I felt it in my heart, a letter that had evidently been written long ago, sealed and all ready to go. Some familiar, sweet, graceful recollection passed through my mind. Zina, I began. Rosina, we both began singing. I almost embracing her in delight, and she, having blushed as only she could blush, laughing through her tears, which trembled like pearls on her black eyelashes. Well, enough. Goodbye now, she said in a rush. Here's the letter for you, and here's the address to take it to. Goodbye, until we meet, until tomorrow. She firmly clasped both my hands, nodded her head, and flew away like an arrow down the lane. I stood there for a long time, following her with my eyes. Until tomorrow, flashed through my head as she disappeared from sight. That was crazy for God knows whatever reason. Damn, that was intense. So bye-bye and take care. Until next time.